Hello everybody, welcome to today's tutorial. It's Sandy here and we're going to be making a lovely interlined and blackout lined Roman blind for you. We're going to show you how to interlock everything and make everything bespoke, hand sewn and with no stitch lines, and it's going to look very professional. So it's nice to have you on board today. Now I'm just going to explain a little bit about this fabric to you. It's a lovely fabric from Clark & Clark. It's very contemporary, it's beautiful quality, it's got lovely colours. I'm going to be railroading this fabric today because some fabrics you can't do that with if the pattern is running horizontally, but if the pattern looks okay to run vertically as well as horizontally, it's much better not to have any joins in your fabric. So obviously railroad it, which is called, well, railroad means running it the other way. So this is what I'm going to do today so that we don't have any kind of stitch lines, and it just looks a whole lot better. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my tape measure and find the centre point of the blind. I've already actually marked out the sides of the blind before doing this. The size of the blind is 230 centimetres, so I am going to find the centre and put my tape measure to 115 centimetres in the actual centre of the octagon. So I've marked that, gone to the end, checked that from the middle of the octagon it's 115 centimetres, and then the other side is also 115 centimetres, so that when you look at the pattern at the side, you will see that it's all lined up really nicely all the way from the bottom to the top at both sides, and that you can see the same pattern at both sides. You don't want to be seeing like 5 inches of one part of the pattern and 2 inches of the other, because that will look really imbalanced. It won't look nice and sort of straight, and it will look odd. So always make sure that you have exactly the same amount of pattern each side. So I'm now flipping the fabric over so that the right side is facing my bench, and I'm turning up the bottom of the blind to start doing the hem. So my sides are always done first and then the hem comes afterwards. So I'm just sort of working out where best to position the bottom of the blind. I would have loved to have done it where I'm looking at it now, but there wouldn't have been enough fabric to do that, so I'm starting my pattern there, and then I will flip that bottom part over once I've pressed it to form my double hem, which is where the bottom bar will go through. So I'm just giving the hem a good press and checking the pattern, and I'm very happy with how it's looking. So the next thing I shall do now is the finished drop of the blind. So I will get my tape measure and obviously position the tape measure to the correct drop. So I'll probably get my assistant Leo to help me with the actual top part of the blind, because it's quite easy to do it with the two people, but when you're doing it on your own it's a bit tricky. You've got to keep running around the corner, and so what she'll do, I'm probably just helping her for a minute just to sort of tell her, is turn the blind over, and that will be the finished drop, because the tape measure is already in the actual position of the 120 centimetres, but I will go back and check it, obviously, but it makes it much easier if you've got another person to help you hold the tape measure in place. But you can see that I've got quite a bit at the top to play around with. That some of that will be cut away, I don't need all of that, but for now I will just turn it over and then give the top a good press like I'm doing there, and that will give you a sort of crease line, so that you've got that to guide you when you're putting the Velcro on the top. So what I'm doing there is just folding it over all the way along, checking the pattern. So I shall continue to measure the blind at the bottom, and Leo will help me at the top. She's going to be making sure the measurements are correct, and as we go she will start pressing the top. So we've got our nice crease mark for when we're putting our Velcro on, because that obviously the crease mark will guide us to where the Velcro goes. If you're looking at the blind from there on downwards, you will position your Velcro about 2 millimeters below the crease line. The reason you do this, well, there's two reasons. The first reason, you don't want to see your Velcro at the top of your blind. And the second reason is that the male Velcro that attaches to the female Velcro of the blind doesn't start until about sort of 2 millimeters from the top of the track. So you want them both to sort of like match up together, really. So we're now positioning our interlining into the blind. We're going to be taking it to the sides and just to the bottom. We're not going to turn it over and add any to the sides at all, because it will affect the way the blind goes up and down if it's too thick at the sides. So pulling it all the way down and getting it nice and flat, and then we'll just take off the excess at the sides. So I'm now going to use this ruler to work out my where my pleats are going to go, my rod pockets rather, and I always start with the second one up because that's the most central and the nearest one to me that I can reach, and then I'll do obviously the first one afterwards. So I'm just working out where my second pleat is going to be positioned with my calculations. So I get it all in place with this tool, and then I give it a really good press, make sure it's all straight along the pattern, and then sort of sometimes I'll pin it in a little bit, but this seems quite stable, and then I'm going to work out where I'm going to put my rings next. So I'm now going to do the calculations of how far apart to sew my rings in, which will have to correspond with the cartridges in the blind cartridge track. So I'm just sort of working out really how many I will need to do. Right, so I've got my 233, I've taken off my 20 centimetres for my 10 either end, and I've left with 213. I've divided that by 6, and that has given me my 35.5 centimetres between each ring. So I've obviously pinned in where these rings are going to go. So you start with 10, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Obviously you're left with 10 at the end. So I'm starting the first rod pocket on the left hand side. Now I'm just putting in a little stitch just before I get to the rod pocket, just to secure it before I start. Sometimes I do this and sometimes I don't, but just depends what kind of mood I'm in, I suppose. It doesn't really make any difference if you don't put one in before, but I guess I like to just have it all kind of like nice and locked in before I do the first one. Mainly I do, but yeah, if I'm tight for time, then maybe not. And it depends what size the blind is and all that kind of jargon. So there I am going in the first one, which is obviously where the pin is. It doesn't look like it's in line, but it is in line. So now I'm going in between each rod pocket ring. This is to sort of strengthen it stitch. So yeah, I do one little one in between each stab stitch, locking stitch. You can call it stab stitch, but stab stitching usually is something completely different. But it's when you go through all of the like layers of fabric, like lining, interlining. But I don't do that method. I always do the locking in method. I find it much easier and looks better. So yeah, I prefer this way of doing it. But you can see that I'm now on a ring where the cord will come down. So this bit has to be very strong, the bit where the ring is. The other bit is just to stabilise it a little bit, but this, you've got to make sure your stitches are, you know, quite strong here. But don't overdo it. Don't pull tightly on your thread, and just make sure you do a couple of each. But mainly sort of 2 or 3 on the interlining afterwards, so that when you go to the next one, you know the last one is all locked in and really, you know, it's got its own sort of, you know, locking in stitch to close it, if you get what I mean. It's as if you're like over sewing something before you cut it away. You want to make sure it's really strong, so it's not going to be able to come undone. Well, that applies to this, so that's what I'm doing. I'm just literally going all along. It's a little bit time consuming, but it really makes for a beautiful blind, so it's worth doing. Right, so now we've finished the last rod pocket lock-in stitch for the interlining. We're now going to flatten all the interlining out, tuck it under our turn-ins at the sides, turn the sides in. Make sure you turn it in at the side before you turn it up at the bottom, because obviously we've got to get a rod through the bottom, so we have to make it so that it's like that at the bottom. Tuck that bit in, and the rod pocket's going to, the bottom bar will go in this bit here. So now we've got that in. Okay, now we're going to herringbone stitch across the sides so that it's all completely locked in nicely. And we've done the same at the very far end. So what I'm going to do is, obviously we've got to move this so that it's at the bottom of the bench now. Right, so now we've finished all the locking in, we are going to turn our sides in and our hem in, but I'm now going to start doing the herringbone stitch that I've shown you in the past. We start at the bottom of the blind, locking it in, and once we've got it sort of like, you know, locked in, we then start the herringbone. So you go into the fabric and then across into the interlining, and you're literally doing like a kind of triangular stitch, and it's really nice locking in stitch. It's very strong and stops everything from moving about. Right, so now that everything is interlocked, we now are going to add our lining to the blind, which we have already made up. If you want to see that tutorial, I will link it in the description bar below, but it's basically made of blackout lining, obviously, because this is a blackout interlined Roman blind, although the one on the previous tutorial was a normal lining. It works the same way. So, but when you're putting these linings in, you have to be careful not to take too much of the blackout lining when you're putting in your lock-in stitches. Make sure that you go through the channel and only take one layer of it, because if you take too much, you'll see needle marks in your blind when it's against the light, and it doesn't look great. So make sure that you only take one layer when you're picking up the interlocking stitch, and obviously I'm going along and I'm doing exactly the same as I did with the interlining. I'm totally above the stitch lines before. As you can see, there's like a little crease just below me, so we know we're in the right place. Obviously we've measured it, but you know, make sure that you're sort of above that line and you can't really go wrong. So we're taking a few stitches from the interlining and getting our cotton knotted up in the process. This cotton doesn't seem to be very good. It's maybe because I've just taken such long lengths of it, it just gets really knotted up quite easily. So now we're going to pull the lining down, now that we've done the middle locking in rod pocket. So we're going to pin from the middle rod pocket down to the first rod pocket and then up to the third rod pocket, so that we've sort of nice and sort of reinforced it all and we've got it all nice and pinned in to stop it from moving. So yes, we're now going to be doing the bottom rod pocket, which is what I'm literally just positioning it all in now, and I'm going to get some pins and start pinning it all in. But at the minute I'm just going to measure from the bottom rod pocket to the bottom of the blind to check the measurements are okay. So now I'm pinning the second rod pocket to the first rod pocket, because obviously the second one is now locked in, and then I'm going to be locking in the first one. I'm also continuing up because the rod pockets channels have been locked in on the up to the third one, so I only pin up to the third one because then the third one will need doing when I have to go around the other side of the bench. So I'm now just measuring along, checking that it's all straight before I start my locking in stitches. So from the pin I am going to mark my second mark for the ring, which is 35.5, and then I will just carry on along as I did before. Right, so I've faced up the blackout lining and it's all ready to start sewing along the side. So all the channels are locked in as we showed you. We started doing these two first, and then we turned around, flipped this one back, and we did this one, and then we did this one here. So we're now at the top of the blind. Our sides are still to be sewn up with our slip stitch, but the first thing I'm now going to do is put the Velcro in. So that's before I start sewing everything up, because then it will all be ready to go all the way around and be sewn. So what I'm doing is I've got the finished drop. I'll show you here. The finished drop is here, this little crease line here, but I've pulled it back so that I can face up the Velcro, and that is where I'm positioning the Velcro, literally 2 millimeters from the crease line, and then I'm going to pin all the way along, which I've done here, perpendicular, so that all stays in place. It's very important that you pin it a lot here, or tack it. Tacking is even better. So yeah, I'm just going to go all along until I get to the very end and then cut it off, and then I'm going to go to the machine and sew that. Right, so I've done the Velcro at the top. So if I can just show you, I haven't got my my lovely videographer person in today. Well, she's coming in later, but she's a bit poorly at the minute. So anyway, I've just done this, put this Velcro on, and you've got the little crease line here. So that's what that looks like, and I've caught the interlining so that you know that that's caught and it's not going to go anywhere. So obviously you don't want to lose your interlining. So I've folded that over, and then I'm going to tuck this under here so that we've only got sort of like 5. Just trying to show you without, it's very difficult to do this one-handed while I'm filming as well. But anyway, that's what it's going to look like. So you're going to then sew all across here by hand, and then sew your sides down here. That's nice and flat, and it looks like that. So that will all be sewn down nicely all the way along. I've already pinned this end in so you can see how nice and neat it is. And then once I've sewn all across here, I will then go down. I will close these rod pockets along here, keep these ones open so that I can put all the rod pockets in, like the rods, the fiberglass rods that I use, and they will go in these little channels here. And then once they're in, I will then do a little stitch to close those off. And again here, I've left this open where the rod bottom bar will go in. Like it's a thick, it's about that wide, it's about an inch and a bit. That goes in the bottom. But first of all, I will sew all of this up as I go all the way around. Then I'll put all the rods in, and then the rings. So we're getting there, guys. This is what it looks like at the moment. It's all nice and sort of pressed in. I've gone through all the measurements and they're all perfect. So we've got a really lovely luxurious blind, which obviously has interlining in the inside, all locked in, and then our lovely blackout satin finish, silky blackout lining, which is gorgeous. Yeah, so I'm going to go on to the next stage now and start sewing around the blind. Right, so I've started from this corner, I've worked round, and then I've got to here. So I am just doing the slip stitch, which is into the lining. Don't go right through, because you don't want to see any stitching from the other end. You just go in, about 2 centimeters I usually do it, well, 1.5. This is a little bit tricky, this one. Blackout lining isn't always easy to sew, but it does look so nice. And it feels really lovely and thick and luxurious, so that's the main thing. Obviously, if you're doing something like this for someone, you know, you've got to bear in mind that it takes a lot of time. It's not a 5-minute job. So make sure you, if you're charging, you charge accordingly, because your time is much more than just doing a regular blind where you're just facing it up with normal lining. Okay, so I'm going to carry on doing this. Right, so now that we've sewn all around the blind and we've put our rod pockets in and sewn the sides of the rod pockets, we've now positioned we're positioning our rings accordingly, so they will go where we've got the little locking in stitch, if you can see there. So we put each ring in line with that. Don't get it mixed up with the locking in stitches in between each ring. Make sure you get the, you know, the primary, you know, where you've got at the top of the track there where the cord is coming down. Make sure you've got your rings in line with that. So it's probably a good idea to get your track all ready at this stage and make sure that you've got all your cartridges in line with each ring, as you can see going along. so that all the rings are going to be exactly in the right place, because you don't want them sort of like some off. So make sure that you I mean, sometimes I'll pull the cord down and I'll just mark it with a pin, or just stick a pin in where the cord is coming down, just to double check I've got it in the right place. And then obviously it should marry up with your little locking in stitches. So at the moment I'm sewing little rings onto the rod pocket channels, and it's very easy to do. You literally just sort of go in a couple of times, obviously put your ring in place, go in a couple of times, sort of over sew it to get it nice and secure, to get the cotton nice and secure, and then just sort of like do maybe 3 or 4 round the ring. And then I usually hold the ring up and then twirl the cotton around the ring in like a circle about 3 times, and then I shall go back in into the actual channel again about another 3 or 4 times, and that holds it very securely. And then cut your cotton and on to your next one. So we're threading the cords through the little rings, and it's come from the top. So we've done the top one and the next one and the next one, and then when you get to the end, you've got your little orb. I call them orbs, and you squeeze them together, and then you can put your cord through the little hole that you can see. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. Put the cord through the hole, and you got it through, and obviously when you pull that, it stays because it's clasped to the actual cord. So you then pull the cord in like that. Now sometimes people pull hard on their blind and these come undone because of the child legislation thing, but because I've got a quick release cord in the corner, which I shall show you, this is what I have in the corner of the blind. It's a quick release mechanism, so if a child gets caught in the cord, you can do that quickly and it comes undone. Okay, so to get this back in, you've got a little dip there, and then you've got your mechanism sticking out a little bit there, so you just push that in and squeeze it and it clips back into place like that. So because we've got this mechanism in the corner, it means we're able to put a knot at the bottom of the orb to secure it, so that when the client will pull the chain, they won't lose their cords if they press too hard, so it will stay where it should do. So here is our finished Roman blind now that we've wound it up, and it's got lovely stepped pleats. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button. Thanks again for watching.